Can the end of Season 3 Mark win every fight he's lost so far? Mark has been in a lot of fights since the first season, and unfortunately, he lost most of them miserably. But with Conquest now temporarily defeated, has Mark found his stride? It begs the question. At his current power level, would Mark have lost so many of those fights? Today, that's exactly what we are going to figure out. Starting out all the way back in the first season with the first encounter of the Flaxons. Mark starts the fight out with the eagerness, but is quickly overwhelmed. He struggles with his coordination and gets blasted, thrown, and beaten multiple times. If not for the other heroes helping him out of tight spots, he might have been injured more severely. Mark even gets grabbed and shocked by the Flaxons at one point. On top of all of that, he struggles to save even a single person who is seriously injured. The only reason the Flaxons retreat is due to their rapid aging and not any efforts made by Mark or the team at large. So could Season 3 Mark have fared better? Absolutely yes is the answer. Mark is not only much stronger in Season 3, but also much wiser, having more battle experience and being a bit older and in control of his abilities. While the Flaxons were a bit of a challenge for Season 1 Mark, Season 3 Mark might have barely struggled at all against them. Later in the same episode, Mark comes up against the Flaxons again, and while he fares a bit better this time, even going into a bit of a frenzy, he would have still lost in the end. The Flaxons are better coordinated, seem to have more tech, and are just better equipped to handle Earth's heroes at a time. Until Omni-Man intervenes, that is. They still would have posed a little challenge to Season 3 Mark, but it's still worth mentioning he also technically lost this fight. However, he doesn't lose the next fight on any technical grounds. No. In this fight, he loses badly. This is a bit later in the season, and the first time we see Mark come against a foe who is way stronger than he is. At first, it's just Mark and Titan versus some Machine Head's goons, and the fight isn't going too badly for Mark. He loses his cool and actually dispatches several of the villains at once. That is before the Battle Beast intervenes. The Guardians are even there providing support just to really show how bad this loss really is. The other villains are a background set piece compared to the main showdown of Battle Beast versus all of them. Not only does Battle Beast manhandle half of the Guardians, but he also singles out Mark, punching him into walls and ceilings and smashes his ribs with that brutal maul, and eventually beats him unconscious nearly to death, spitting on him in disgust at just how weak he is. Mark is hospitalized for days and requires intensive care to survive. The only reason he was still alive was that Battle Beast got bored and decided to leave. So could Season 3 Mark have won this fight? Short answer, no. Absolutely not. Mark may have been able to mop up the low-level goons with ease, but the Battle Beast would most likely still brutalize him, maybe even deciding to finish the job. While Mark is now a lot stronger than he was before, he is still only a candle compared to a bonfire when it comes to Battle Beast. He would have fared a lot better, maybe even getting some decent shots in. The battle would have definitely been carried out across the city, but we know from the source material that Battle Beast is on a whole other level beyond that of even Conquest. No matter the collateral, the fight would still have ended the same way. Except Battle Beast might have had a little bit more interest in the fight and likely would have finished the job. Let's move on to a bit more of an evenly matched battle. Towards the end of the season, as shocking revelations develop, we see Cecil unleash a massive kaiju to stop Omni-Man from finding Mark. This would have worked had Mark not found his dad anyway. Mark tries to intervene, not yet knowing the terrible truth. He tries to save his father. Starting the fight out very strong, he hits the enhanced kaiju so hard that a giant tooth comes flying out of its head, landing hundreds of feet away. But that's about the only good shot he gets in for the entire fight. He works with his father to bring the beast down, but as soon as Omni-Man is distracted by the Immortal, things go south for Mark pretty quickly. Struggling to even stay alive during this encounter, it's only due to Nolan's repeated interventions whenever he gets a chance that Mark is able to come out on top. Had Omni not been there, it would have likely been the end of Mark. So would Mark have fared better at his current level? I believe Mark would have beaten the creature, but not without a fight. This beast still caused quite the issue for Omni-Man himself, so I have my doubts as to how well the current Mark would cope. But given that once Omni-Man has regained his footing and is able to focus entirely on the creature, the fight is over pretty quickly. It can't have been too much of a match. Mark would have likely come through, but again, it would have been a bit more drawn out. He would have had to have been careful and placed his shots with strategy, or he might still be overwhelmed in the end. That brings us directly to the next fight, which Mark loses without a doubt. The biggest fight of the season, Omni-Man versus Mark. The moment of truth arrives and Mark is not ready in any sense. The fight starts out pretty fast and Omni-Man goes for shock and awe tactics against Mark, trying to show him that he doesn't stand a chance and that the humans he so desperately fights for are nothing more than vermin to the Viltrum Empire. But that doesn't work. Mark still decides to stand directly against his dad and try to defend the people of Earth. Nolan puts him in his place brutally, smashing him through the city of Chicago, killing thousands and collapsing buildings in his wake. But the most iconic moment of season 1 comes when Nolan pushes Mark through a speeding passenger train, killing almost everyone in it, using Mark as the tool of their demise. The broken but not beaten Mark is still trying desperately to appeal to his dad. Nolan ignores him and loses it at this point, slamming Mark into a mountain and punching him so hard that the entire thing cracks like an egg. He gives a long monologue too, before beating Mark bloody and flying off. Mark is broken both physically and mentally, but he is alive. The only reason he is alive is because Nolan chose to leave him that way. So, how would season 3 Mark have gone? Better, but not by much. That may be a hot take, seeing as Mark brought down Conquest, but let's not forget Conquest was a rabid dog let off the leash to have fun and toy with his food. Nolan was an elite and refined conqueror whose greatest strength was strategy and subterfuge. In the fight, he tried to break the Mark emotionally before losing it and breaking him physically. He tried to win the fight by showing Mark it was pointless to fight him. Before, he just indulged his son and won almost instantly. Conquest showed no such strategy. He just wanted to play. Also, Mark had a ton of help in that fight. In his fight against Nolan, he was completely alone. So Mark may have been able to take a few more hits, might have lasted a bit longer, maybe he would have even given his old man a run for his money for a while. But Nolan would have outthought Mark at every turn, with hundreds of years more experience than his son, multiple planets under his belt. It's just still a fight that Mark is not ready to win yet. The first season, Mark has a few huge losses, and even the current day Mark might not have been able to shift the tide. So how does he fare in season 2? Season 2 ramps up the wins and the losses. There's a lot to get into, so let's get started. Towards the end of episode 1, Mark comes face to face with one of the biggest villains yet, and he is completely unaware just how far it will go in the end. Angstrom Levy at this point still wants to do good. He's built a large machine to combine the knowledge of himself from multiple universes in order to help him build a utopia. But that's all about to go horribly wrong. Mark intervenes and doesn't quite know what the ominous machine will do, but he does see the Mauler clones and suspects it can't be good. He starts the fight out pretty well. It's clear he will win easily, that is, until Angstrom drops multiple variations of the Maulers in from multiple universes. Mark holds his ground quite well for a few moments, fighting multiple enemies at once and keeping them back, but eventually they overwhelm him. The beating he gets is brutal enough that Angstrom, in what might be his last act of mercy, tries to shut down the machine, which explodes in spectacular fashion.
Stop him, but don't kill him! No, I won't build my utopia with blood! Stop! There's too much power!
The only reason Mark barely walks away from this fight is that Angstrom ironically tried to help him. Season 3 Mark is measurably stronger than he was at the start of Season 2. No doubt, the Maulers wouldn't have stood a chance. He would have brought them down much faster and likely wouldn't have become overwhelmed if he made sure they stayed down long enough for him to tackle the next one. But he likely would not have been able to stop the machine without it exploding. So we can call this one a draw. The next one won't be for sure. On planet Thraxa, after Mark reunites with his father, the worst possible thing that could happen does. A Viltrumite scouting party finds them and descends on the planet. Mark is hopelessly, hilariously outclassed here. There's not just one Viltrumite he's up against here. It's 3 adult Viltrumites. Most of the fight, Mark is barely able to stay alive thanks to his father's help. Nolan has to constantly intervene, or Mark would have been brutally killed multiple times. That is, until he loses his cool and is able to provide a little challenge for the lady Viltrumite he comes up against. Showing just how far Mark has come in just a little bit of time, he actually seems to win the fight, but he is unable to finish the job, allowing her to get one last blow, stabbing him straight in the torso. Once again, Nolan is forced to intervene. Just a second later, and Mark would have lost the fight and his life. Thanks to a sneak attack from the last surviving Viltrumite, even Nolan loses his fight.
Mark, are you okay?
No.
Don't worry, it's over. Let me have a look.
Dad!
Next time kill somebody, make sure they're dead.
A shocking loss from the father-son duo. But if the current Mark had been there, it likely would have been a different outcome altogether. Not only has Season 3 Mark fought more than a few Viltrumites, he's lost a lot of his reluctance to kill if he has to. While those 3 Viltrumite warriors were a terrifying prospect to Season 2 Mark, they were no match for Omni-Man, and they were definitely not Conquest. Mark likely would have won the fight with ease considering he almost won back in Season 2. It was just his naive mercy that allowed the Viltrumite to get a fatal blow in. A mistake he definitely wouldn't let happen twice. race. Towards the end of the season, he comes up against another Viltrumite, Anissa. Unlike the previous Viltrumite scouting party, Anissa is an elite member of the warrior race. Sent as an unofficial diplomat, she attempts to reason with Mark at first, tries to appeal to his sense of bettering the human race. But Mark sees through the lies and the diplomacy. Anissa is so blindedly fast that she punches Mark into the atmosphere and seems to almost teleport behind him before smashing him back down to the earth full force. They tussle a bit and Mark lands a few shots. They don't do anything, but he does land them. All of this seemed to be Anissa just playing around because the moment she gets serious, all Mark can do is flail around trying not to die. The fight is over in seconds and Mark is left barely conscious in a crater. It's a hard watch for sure, but how would seasoned Mark cope in this situation? A lot better for sure, but I don't think he would win. While he's come up against an even stronger Viltrumite and won, he had help. Lots of it. In this situation, he's completely alone. Not only that, the reason he did so well against Conquest is because Conquest led him. He wanted to enjoy the fight, take his time and have his sick version of fun. Anissa subscribes to no such ideals. She is cold, calculating and efficient, and with her speed, that is said to be faster even than Omni-Man. She would likely still outclass even Season 3 Mark. We aren't sure how old she is, but she has more battle experience, greater control of her powers, she's faster and more brutal, and unlike Conquest, doesn't have any sick notion of letting herself be hit for fun. She would try to end the battle before it even began. An honorable mention to cap off the end of Season 2 is a technical, the return of Angstrom Levy. While Mark is hopelessly outmatched most of this fight, Angstrom is just a guy in reality. No super strength, no flight, no speed, just a man who can make portals. He spends most of the fight pushing Mark through multiple dimensions, tiring him out and just toying with him. But Mark does get the better of him and tricks him into a portal into what seems to be a desolate dimension. Mark does win the fight, although only technically Angstrom lives and he is trapped in a desolate dimension. If it weren't for a future variation of the Guardians of the Globe, he would have been trapped there forever and thus also he would have lost. So that begs the question, how would he fare later on in the series? Well, good news because we have the in-show answer to that. He wins pretty easily. Not only does Mark win, but he wins against an enhanced, tougher Angstrom. Fully equipped with drones and now able to fly thanks to technology, Mark is able to dodge and weave away from portals and brute force his way out of being just pushed into them. He beats Angstrom here fair and square, no trickery or technicalities, just a straight up win, although Angstrom does escape in the end. Coming now to Season 3, there aren't going to be any huge changes in the way a lot of these fights work out, but towards the end of the season, Mark makes a vow to Oliver that he will have far less mercy for the villains that pose a threat to his family, so a few of these battles might just nudge into Mark's favor. First up, surprisingly enough, it's Doc Seismic. That's right, not only does Doc Seismic beat Mark, he also captures most of the world's superhero teams and traps them in a super hard substance. Mark and Eve arrive underground to see all of their teammates already captured and are forced to fight Doc Seismic's new army. They do pretty well at first, until one of the giant centipedes manages to poison the Mark. Now easy prey, they are both captured as well. It's thanks to Darkwing and several pods of Reanimin that the day is won. They bring down Seismic and free the heroes. But Mark would have won this out of a technicality. See, Eve was about to free him. He may have been able to buy her enough time to free a few more heroes to gain the upper hand. But Seismic was also about to collapse the cave and crush most of them. So it all comes down to who would have survived long enough to be freed and how fast Mark would have been able to go from defense to offense. We also see that as soon as Seismic was out of the picture, the creatures went almost completely docile. Had Mark targeted Doc Seismic from the get-go and simply ripped him out of there, the creatures would have lost interest and they would have won straight away. Maybe that vow he takes at the end of the season would have made the difference here. That takes us straight into the next fight. Mark versus Cecil, confronting Cecil about the use of the Reanimin and the criminal Darkwing. Cecil, in a bit of desperation, attempts to show Mark that he is not playing around. Taking him to the dark room, he shows off the refinement and new Viltrumite nullification frequency. Mark might have been able to handle the Reanimin, but thanks to the frequency, he is dropped like a sack of potatoes. It's all Mark can do to escape the fight, which he only manages thanks to Cecil halting the frequency for a moment to talk.
Protection from what? Protection from me?
It's my job to defend the planet from threats. Don't make me put you in that category, Mark.
You think you can shut me up? Is that all you got?
Why did you have to ask that, kid? Remember that giant lobster you tangled with in Atlantis? I had the lab boys recreate the sound it made. So be reasonable, Mark.
Mark is able to get to the Guardians and convinces them to remove the transmitter located deep within his ear canal. Thanks to that one piece of crucial detail, the end of the season, Mark would win this fight. We again have more to show evidence that this is the case. While Cecil can play the frequency over loudspeakers, it's not nearly as effective. We see Mark later in the season burst into the White House to confront Cecil again. This time he only needs to cover one ear as he easily dispatches Reaniman one-handed. If Mark weren't called away, who knows how this would have ended for Cecil. Later into the season, we get yet another technicality thanks to the vow we mentioned earlier. Mark once again comes face to face with the Maulers. They have an upgraded weapon that allows them to stun the Guardians, and it even almost works on Mark. Oliver intervenes and Mark is forced to choose between stopping the Maulers or stopping a nuke. Here's why we know Mark will win at the end of the season. Oliver, all on his own, kills the Maulers rather quickly at that. If Mark were alone, it might have taken him a lot longer or he might have lost. But at the end of the season, if Mark is true to his word, he would have put the Maulers down in a similarly brutal fashion. Finally, up to the very last fight in the entire show so far that Mark loses on a technicality. His fight against the two variants of himself. Mark and Eve come across Omnivincible and Maskvincible about halfway through the episode. While they seem to be evenly matched throughout the fight, Mark has one outstanding weakness. Eve. She does a bit to contribute, but is ultimately unable to keep up with the variants and they begin to target her. One of the variants actually spell it out for us. If Mark didn't have to defend Eve, he might have been able to take them on. That vow from the end of the season once again comes into play here. Mark might have forced Eve to leave or gone straight for the kill against the variant he was fighting in order to help Eve with the one she was fighting. It's an interesting question, but one that has ultimately come to an end because Mark wins the remainder of his fights for the season, if only barely. And that's it for the list. Did we miss any fights? Were there any fights we mentioned that you think he could now win? Comment down below, and if you want to know everyone who can take down Omni-Man, then watch the video on screen now.
By the end of season 3, Invincible has evolved from the kid who got ragdolled by his father into someone finally living up to his name. But the question everyone wants to know the answer to is, could current Invincible beat Omni-Man? Well, the answer might surprise you, and it all comes down to one key detail that changes everything: Mark's evolution. Let's start with a key scene everyone remembers. Omni-Man holding Mark's face against a speeding train, civilians dying around them, and Mark completely powerless to stop any of it. That wasn't a fight. It was a lesson in what happens when a Viltrumite with thousands of years of experience faces one who's barely learned to fly. But season 3 Mark is not even close to being that same person. Mark's growth through the next 2 seasons is exponential, and in season 3 we get actual numbers to prove it. Under Cecil Stedman's oversight at the Global Defense Agency, Mark undergoes intense training specifically designed to counter Viltrumites. By episode 4, Donald Ferguson reports Mark's stats. Speed is up 65%, endurance is up 75%.
Over the last 90 days, Mark's speed has increased 65%, his endurance 70%.
Overall strength has increased to the point where he can match threats that previously overwhelmed him, like Anissa. Mark receives a new black and blue suit from Art Rosenbaum, showing his darker side in the season. Honestly, I hated the suit at first, but over the season it actually kind of grew on me. Though the suit isn't what matters. What matters is what Mark can do now. The fights tell the real story. Mark battles Doc Seismic, Powerplex, and multiple evil variants of himself during the Invincible War. The fights tell the real story. Mark battles Doc Seismic, Powerplex, and multiple evil variants of himself during the Invincible War. Each of these encounters pushes him further, forces him to adapt, and makes him significantly stronger through the Viltrumite biological imperative. Because here's the thing about Viltrumite physiology that people forget. They grow stronger through near-death experiences and combat. Then there's the personal evolution. Mark reconciles with Adam Eve, finally starting their relationship.
So are we dating or what?
Yes! I mean, if you want to, I definitely want to. Okay.
He bonds with half-brother Oliver, explicitly advising against repeating Omni-Man's methods. He confronts Cecil over deceptions, leading to a fallout where Mark destroys Reaniman and threatens Cecil's life. #justice for Cecil. This fractures the Guardians of the Globe. But here's what matters for our question. Mark is making choices Omni-Man wouldn't make. He's developing his own moral code, and those choices are forging him into something potentially more dangerous than his father ever was. Hear me out. The season culminates with Mark facing multiversal threats during the Invincible War in episode 7. 7. Evil variants of himself, each one a mirror of what he could become, each one powerful enough to destroy cities. But Mark survives. More than survives even. He actually helps end the threat. By the season's end, Mark is traumatized but empowered and even stands on business, finally, with the fight against Conquest, which undoubtedly makes him significantly stronger once again. So where does all this growth actually leave Mark? What can he do now that he couldn't do before? Defining current Mark. Current Mark, as we're defining him, is Mark at the end of Season 3, Episode 8. Specifically, the Mark who has survived the Invincible War and Conquest fight and processed everything that came before it. This is critical because Mark's power level isn't static. It's growing with every episode. Let's break down what current Mark can actually do with specific feats from the show. Strength and durability first. Mark lifts and throws massive structures during training. Not struggling, not barely managing, actually throwing them. He survives city-level destruction in fights without being incapacitated. Mark overpowers Reaniman by tearing them apart with his bare hands like paper. Speed is where the 65% increase really shows. Mark traverses global distances in seconds. When evil variants attack, Mark reacts to faster than light attacks. Not dodges them all, but reacts, processes what's happening, begins countering. The fact that he can even perceive attacks at that speed puts him in a completely different category than Season 1 Mark. Additionally, during his final fight with Angstrom Levy, we see a clear increase in speed when he manages to dodge numerous portals. Combat prowess has evolved beyond raw power. Mark defeats Powerplex, a villain specifically enhanced to absorb kinetic energy and fire electric blasts without serious injury. He battles 18 evil multiversal variants, overpowering several solo before they coordinate against Angstrom Levy. These variants cause widespread devastation and kill heroes like Rexplode. Mark fights multiple versions of himself all at once and survives. Then there's the Conquest fight, Episode 8. Now this is the big daddy of growth. Conquest dominates initially. He's slaughtering civilians, seemingly nearly killing Mark several times. Mark should die, but somehow this guy just keeps getting up. At one point, this guy taps into his adrenaline, biting into Conquest's shoulder and hitting a devious combo. Now, when he is about to get ground pounded, Adam Eve intervenes, burning off Conquest's skin with a full power blast, and then Mark finishes it with headbutts, crushing Conquest's skull until the Viltrumite stops moving. This is the questionable part, since Mark didn't fully beat him solo. Though while he was close to losing, Conquest was playing at first and he wasn't fully on his own. It's safe to say that Mark did a crazy job at beating up Conquest, and it'll only get easier from now, which helps us get closer to an answer. Because according to Global Defense Agency leader Cecil Stedman, Conquest is explicitly stated to be stronger than Omni-Man. Even Omni-Man would likely lose to Conquest. Mark defeats him. With help, yes, but he defeats him. Regeneration and adaptation show Mark healing from maiming injuries in days, and he adapts mid-fight, growing stronger through Viltrumite biology, learning patterns, improving technique as battles progress. Current Mark operates at planetary level threats. He's no longer a city level hero learning the ropes. He's fighting beings who can destroy civilizations, and he's winning. The 65% speed increase and 70% endurance increase aren't just numbers. They represent the gap between Season 1 Mark, who got demolished, and Season 3 Mark, who stands a legitimate chance. But here's the question everyone's avoiding. Mark beats Conquest with help. He needed Eve's intervention. He needed Rage to push past his limits. Can he beat Omni-Man solo? Because Nolan isn't just strong, he's something else entirely. Nolan's power. Nolan Grayson, Mark's father, and the Viltrumite who nearly conquered Earth single-handedly. Let's be very clear about what Omni-Man represents, because this isn't just about raw power. This is about what happens when you take Viltrumite biology and add thousands of years of experience. The strength feats establish the baseline. Omni-Man lifts over 100 tons casually. In the comics, with help from the other Viltrumites, he punches through planets. The show scales this back, but solo mountain busting is still within his capabilities. In Season 1, he decimates the Guardians of the Globe single-handedly. These are Earth's mightiest heroes, each one powerful enough to defend the planet. Omni-Man kills them all in minutes. Let's be specific about that fight because it demonstrates tactical superiority. He doesn't just overpower them, he systematically eliminates each Guardian by exploiting their specific weaknesses. War Woman gets speed blitzed. Darkwing gets crushed before he can even use his gadget. Red Rush, the speedster, gets his head pulped because Omni-Man predicts his pattern. execution based on thousands of years of combat knowledge. Durability and speed put Omni-Man at the top of the show's hierarchy. He tanks nuclear equivalent hits without serious injury. He flies at faster than light speeds, crossing solar systems in what appears to be hours or days. He survives in space without air for weeks. When you fight Omni-Man, you're not fighting someone who can be worn down through attrition. You're fighting someone whose baseline durability exceeds almost everything you can throw at him. Combat experience is where the gap becomes truly terrifying. Omni-Man mentors younger Viltrumites, teaching them techniques refined over millennia. He defeats kaijus and entire civilizations solo. His tactical acumen allows him to identify and exploit weaknesses instantly. When he fights Mark in Season 1, he's not struggling, he's teaching. Every blow is calculated to cause maximum pain while keeping Mark alive long enough to learn the lesson. But Season 3 context changes things. Omni-Man is imprisoned by Viltrumites and faces execution. He bonds with Alan the alien, escapes with Battle Beast's help, and reveals the Viltrumite Empire has fewer than 50 pure bloods left. This is crucial information. Omni-Man hasn't faced the same escalated threats as Mark in Season 3. He's been imprisoned, fighting for survival against other Viltrumites, not testing his limits against multiversal variants or planet-destroying villains. Some analysis argue Omni-Man could still win through superior tactics, his thousands of years of experience versus Mark's few years of actual combat. The technique gap might be insurmountable regardless of raw power levels. Okay, so if a fight breaks out, what does it really come down to? Omni-Man has greater experience, tactical knowledge, and a killer instinct that Mark might lack. He knows how to fight Viltrumites because he's been fighting them for thousands of years. He knows the techniques, the vulnerabilities, the psychological warfare tactics that break opponents. But Mark has something Omni-Man might not account for: growth potential, rage, and the ability to surpass his limits when pushed to the edge. And in a fight between a father who's already reached his ceiling and a son who's still climbing, that might be everything. So how does the actual fight play out? We're looking at 4 distinct scenarios. Each one plays out differently based on circumstances, mindset, and what both fighters are willing to do. Because that's the thing about Viltrumite fights. Scenario 1, straight brawl. This would just be the 2 Viltrumites meeting in the sky and trading blows until one stops moving. This is the scenario that favors strength and experience. In a pure slugfest, Omni-Man's thousands of years of combat knowledge give him edges Mark can't compensate for. He knows how to position his body to maximize impact. He knows when to tank hits and when to deflect. He understands momentum and leverage in 3-dimensional combat in ways Mark is still learning. But here's where current Mark's physical improvements matter. That 65% speed increase means Mark is reacting faster than Omni-Man remembers from Season 1. The 70% endurance increase means Mark isn't getting worn down as quickly. When Omni-Man goes for the moves that worked before, holding Mark's face against surfaces, crushing his bones, Mark's enhanced durability lets him survive longer. The Conquest fight proves Mark can withstand prolonged assault from someone stronger than Omni-Man. If he can survive Conquest's assault, he can survive Omni-Man's for a little while at least. Omni-Man likely wins the early exchanges, but as the fight extends, as Mark adapts and grows, the gap closes. Eventually, Mark's rage and refusal to quit push him past his limits, the same way he pushed past Conquest, but I still think Omni-Man would have a slight edge. So overall, I would give this fight a 4 out of 10 chance to Mark. But the next 3 scenarios are way crazier. Scenario 2, Mark fights smart. Now we're talking. This is where Mark really steps up his game and starts to use all the knowledge and new skills he's got. Mark knows Omni-Man better than almost anyone. He knows his father's arrogance, his belief in Viltrumite superiority, his emotional weak points about Earth and Debbie. In a tactical fight, Mark has information Omni-Man might not expect him to use. The strategy would involve baiting Omni-Man into overcommitting, make him think he's winning, then counter when he gets careless, use the environment. High-frequency sounds could disrupt Omni-Man's equilibrium, leading the fight near GDA facilities where Cecil could intervene with experimental weapons, forcing Omni-Man to choose between fighting Mark and protecting civilians, exploiting the psychological conflict that broke Omni-Man in Season 1. Mark's personal conflicts from Season 3 shows he's willing to make hard choices now. He destroyed Reanimant and threatened Cecil's life when pushed. He's not the naive hero anymore. If fighting smart means fighting dirty, current Mark might do it. This scenario shifts odds to maybe 6 out of 10 for Mark because he's using every advantage instead of just brawling, but it requires Mark to be colder, more calculating than we've seen him to be. Unlike the next one, which will be nearly impossible to survive. Scenario 3, Nolan goes full power. Omni-Man fights Mark the way he fought the Guardians of the Globe, with lethal intent and maximum efficiency. This is the nightmare scenario for Mark, because we've never actually seen Omni-Man go all out against his son. Season 1 was a beating, absolutely, but Omni-Man wanted Mark alive. What happens when that restraint disappears? Omni-Man's flight mastery gives him 3-dimensional superiority. He controls engagement distance, attacking from angles Mark can't predict, using speed to disorient. His tactical experience means he's not making mistakes. Every move is calculated to inflict maximum damage while minimizing risk. The execution method would be systematic. Omni-Man targets Mark's emotional vulnerabilities first, brings up Debbie, Eve, and even Oliver. Then he exploits that fractured mental state with precise strikes designed to cripple, not kill immediately. immediately, break Mark's limbs, rupture organs, force Mark into a defensive position where Rage can't even save him because he physically can't move. Mark's only counter is the same thing that saved him against Conquest: pure, unfiltered Viltrumite rage that pushes past all damage, all pain, all rational thought. Biting, clawing, headbutting, whatever it takes. The animal fury that let him crush Conquest's skull. But would that be enough against Omni-Man fighting seriously? I'm leaning towards a hard no here. Not without help or without something to give Mark the edge he needs. This scenario probably goes 2 out of 10 to Mark. Mark could pull out a win through sheer refusal to die and Viltrumite adaptation, but it's unlikely. But what if the fight had a much bigger emotional factor? Here's what none of the other scenarios account for. Neither of them wants this fight. Omni-Man's entire Season 1 arc was about his love for Mark breaking through Viltrumite conditioning. He left Earth rather than kill his son. He's shown throughout the series that Mark is his weakness, the one thing that makes him question everything the Empire taught him. Mark, despite everything, still loves his father. He's traumatized by what Nolan did, absolutely. He's rejected Nolan's philosophy, but that doesn't erase the fact that for most of Mark's life, Nolan was a good father. The psychological conflict of actually trying to kill Omni-Man would affect Mark's performance. In this scenario, the fight happens, but both fighters are holding back emotionally even as they go all out physically. Point, not kill. Mark is trying to prove he's strong enough to stand against his father, not murder him. That changes everything. Because in a fight where both combatants are subconsciously pulling their most lethal moves, where neither is truly committed to ending the other, technique and experience matter more than raw power. Omni-Man probably takes a 6 out of 10 because his emotional control is better. Thousands of years of conditioning mean he can compartmentalize better than Mark. He can hurt Mark badly enough to win without crossing the line into patricide. Mark, younger and more emotionally volatile, might make mistakes that cost him. But if something happens during the fight, if Omni-Man goes too far or says the wrong thing and triggers Mark's rage fully, all bets are off. Because Rage Mode Mark, the Mark who crushed Conquest's skull, doesn't think. He just fights. And that version of Mark might be unstoppable. According to research from multiple sources, if allies intervene, as often happens in this series, Mark's odds improve significantly. Adam Eve's intervention was crucial against Conquest. If Eve or Oliver or even Alan the alien shows up during a Mark versus Omni-Man fight, that tips scales toward Mark. He proved that he can win with support. Solo is where questions remain. So we've broken down the scenarios. We've looked at how different circumstances change outcomes. But you're here for the actual answer. Can current Invincible beat Omni-Man? Let's do the final head-to-head comparison and give you the verdict. Can current Invincible beat Omni-Man? Yes, but it's close. Really close. By the end of Season 3, Invincible has evolved from the kid who got absolutely destroyed by Omni-Man into someone finally living up to the name. But the question everyone wants to know the answer to is, could the current Invincible beat Conquest in a rematch? Well, the answer might surprise you, and it all comes down to one key detail that changes everything: Mark's evolution. Let's trace Mark's journey through Season 3 to understand exactly who we're dealing with by Episode 8. Season 3 picks up months after Mark defeated Angstrom Levy, but struggled with trauma. The season emphasizes his evolution from novice hero to becoming an actual Viltrumite, not a pussy, facing multiversal threats, personal dilemmas, and the Viltrum Empire's encroachment. Under Cecil Stedman's oversight at the GDA, Mark undergoes intense training specifically designed to counter Viltrumites. In the early episodes, Donald Ferguson reports concrete numbers: speed up 65%, endurance up 70%, overall strength increased to match threats that previously overwhelmed him.
Over the last 90 days, Mark's speed has increased 65%, his endurance 70%, and his strength 138%.
A 65% speed increase puts Mark in a completely different category than Season 1 or 2. A 70% endurance increase means he can fight longer, take more punishment, recover faster. He receives a new black and blue suit from Art Rosenbaum, symbolizing maturity, but the suit isn't the upgrade. Mark's body is. The battles throughout Season 3 forge him. Doc Seismic tests his raw power. Powerplex, enhanced to absorb kinetic energy and fire electrical blasts, forces Mark to fight smart. The 18 evil multiversal variants during the Invincible War push him to his absolute limit. These aren't just wins on his record, they're experiences that trigger Viltrumite biological adaptation. Because as we know, Viltrumites grow stronger through near-death experiences and combat. Every time Mark gets knocked down and gets back up, his body is literally rewriting itself to be more powerful. By season's end, Mark is traumatized but empowered. He vows to kill family threats. He attends Rexplode's funeral, reflecting on his burdens. He's no longer the naive hero who thought he could save everyone. He's become something harder, more focused, more willing to do what's necessary.
If anyone else ever puts my family or anyone I love at risk, I won't hesitate to kill them.
Then comes the Conquest fight in episode 8, and this is where everything changes. Current Mark, as we're defining him, is Mark at the very end of season 3 after the Conquest battle. Let's be specific about what happened in that fight because it defines current Mark's capabilities. Strength has reached new peaks through Crisis. Mark lifts and throws a big ass iceberg and some super weightlifting set during training. He survives city level destruction in fights. During the Conquest battle, he crushes Conquest Skull with repeated headbutts. That's Viltrumite Skull shattering force generated from someone who couldn't match Conquest strength for strength at the fight's start. In alternate timelines shown, he kills a tyrannical future immortal by decapitation after brutal combat. That's not just strength, that's applying lethal force with precision against an unkillable opponent. Well, somewhat unkillable. Speed has increased 65% from training. Mark traverses global distances in seconds.
I could have done it faster, but I got lost on the way back again.
That was still plenty fast, Mark.
When evil variants attack, he reacts to faster than light attacks. Not perfectly, but he reacts, processes, begins countering. The gap between Season 1 Mark, who couldn't keep up with his father, and Season 3 Mark, who can track FTL movement, is enormous. Durability has been tested at extremes. Mark tanks city destroying impacts. During the Conquest fight, Conquest pushes his body to very near breaking point. Mark should have died in that fight, but plot armor saved him and he survived. Regeneration functions on accelerated timelines. He heals from maiming injuries like broken bones and internal trauma in days. The 70% endurance increase means he recovers faster from damage that used to sideline him for weeks. Combat prowess has evolved through necessity. Mark defeats Powerplex without serious injury. He battles 18 evil multiversal variants, overpowering several solo with relative ease. These variants cause widespread devastation and kill heroes. Mark survives fighting multiple versions of himself simultaneously. The rage factor accessed during the Conquest fight. This is critical. When pushed to his absolute limit, when everything is on the line, Mark taps into something beyond his baseline. He bites into Conquest's shoulder in desperation. He crushes a Viltrumite Skull through sheer refusal to die. That rage-fueled state is part of current Mark's arsenal now and is likely the adrenaline from his human side. Viltrumite adaptation from near death. The Conquest fight pushed Mark closer to death than almost anything before. According to how Viltrumite biology functions, that near-death experience triggers adaptation. Current Mark, immediately post-fight, is stronger than Mark at the fight start. But here's the question. Is all that growth enough to be Conquest without Eve's intervention? To answer that, we might need to look at what Conquest brings to the table. Conquest is a veteran Viltrumite hero, the second most powerful after Thrag, serving as the Empire's nuclear option for maximum destruction on target planets.
All the other Viltrumites are scared of me. I am a victim of my own success. Conquest, only a purpose.
Millennia old, he mentored Omni-Man and survived the Scourge virus, though it impaired his regeneration and led to a cybernetic arm. His scarred, elderly appearance with balding gray hair, blinded eye, and prosthetic arm reflects countless battles. His personality is sadistic, reveling in violence and psychological torment, viewing conquests as pretexts for bloodlust. Strength overpowers Season 3 Mark initially. Conquest's power is immense. He generates city-leveling shockwaves. During their Episode 8 fight, he uses Mark as a weapon to slaughter civilians. He overpowers Mark repeatedly throughout prolonged battle, causing mass destruction. He survives a Ragnar mauling while weakened by Scourge virus. He nearly kills Adam Eve with a single punch. When Conquest hits something, it breaks. Durability survives severe punishment. High durability throughout the Season 3 fight. He tanks hits from Mark, survives Eve's full power blast that burns off his skin, and keeps fighting after Mark crushes his skull.
Got more than enough fight left in me for you, boy. More than enough.
Eventually, he gets imprisoned, healing slowly, but he survives what should have killed him. But there's a critical weakness. His durability wanes post-injury. The Scourge virus permanently impaired his regeneration. He cannot regrow lost limbs, which is why that cybernetic arm exists. Speed outpaces Earth's fastest beings. Exceptional speed that gave Season 3 Mark serious problem. Conquest attacks from angles Mark struggles to predict at speeds that give minimal reaction time. He crosses global distances rapidly, and in combat, moves fast enough that Mark at fight start can't track him consistently. Combat experience spans millennia, centuries of brutal efficiency and mentorship. He taught Omni-Man, which proves his knowledge is extensive. He employs psychological warfare, targeting loved ones and mocking pain to break opponents mentally before finishing them physically.
Oh, such a strong bond. Viltrumites have nothing like this. It's a weakness, really.
The episode 8 fight shows his limits. Conquest dominates initially, nearly killing Mark. Mark rallies with rage, biting Conquest's shoulder. Adam Eve intervenes, burning off Conquest's skin with her blast. Mark finishes with headbutts, crushing Conquest's skull until he stops moving. That fight proves Conquest needed combined efforts to be defeated. Mark alone wasn't enough at fight's start, but Mark at fight's end, after adaptation kicked in, was crushing Conquest's skull. The question is whether that growth persists into a rematch. We've established both fighters, so now we can look at realistic scenarios of what would actually happen if current Invincible fought Conquest. Scenario 1, immediate rematch. Mark faces Conquest again immediately after their first fight. No extended recovery, just round 2 starting as soon as both fighters can stand.
I am your last chance to fulfill your duty.
The only thing I want to do right now is hit something as hard as I can.
Good.
Mark has the advantage of fresh adaptation. His body processed the near-death experience and enhanced itself. The 65% speed increase and 70% endurance increase are fully active. He knows Conquest's tactics now, knows the psychological warfare, knows how Conquest fights. But Conquest also knows Mark now. He sees Mark's rage mode, seen how Mark fights when desperate, seen that Mark can crush Viltrumite's skulls when pushed hard enough. Conquest adjusts his approach. The fight starts with Conquest testing Mark's improvements. Those initial strikes that overwhelmed early fight Mark don't work as well now. Mark's enhanced speed lets him evade or counter more effectively. His enhanced endurance means the prolonged battle favors him more than before. Mark would exploit Conquest's weakness of only having one arm since the prosthetic broke. But the critical factor is whether Mark can access that rage state again without the emotional trigger of civilians dying. In their first fight, seeing people slaughtered and Eve die pushed Mark past his limits.
Eve, you don't live to see tomorrow.
In a rematch without that stimulus, can he reach the same intensity? Most likely, yes. And also Mark has the upper hand literally because he has 2 hands and would have gone much stronger from their first fight. Not to mention that Conquest wouldn't regenerate very well. So I think this would be a very close call, but overall Mark is taking the dub here, especially if he attacks aggressively from the start. Scenario 2, Mark fights smart. Cecil's training taught Mark to counter Viltrumite specifically. Mark knows high frequency sounds disrupt Viltrumite equilibrium.
Remember that giant lobster you tangled with in Atlantis? Turns out we can transmit it to your earpiece. Apart from causing you pain, the sound also messes up your inner ear.
He knows extreme force to specific points can bypass durability. He knows Conquest's regeneration is compromised. The strategy involves wearing Conquest down. Don't trade blow strength for strength where Conquest still has advantages. Use superior speed from the 65 increase to hit and run. Exploit him having only one arm, target areas where damage is permanent, target injuries from their first fight that haven't fully healed, like his chomped face. Mark's growth through Season 3 includes fighting smarter. Against Powerplex, he adapted to energy absorption. Against multiversal variants, he found weaknesses in versions of himself. Against Conquest, he learned that brute force alone isn't enough. But Conquest's psychological warfare targets Mark's emotional vulnerabilities. He goes after Eve, threatens Earth, mocks Mark's failures. This worked brilliantly in their first fight. Mark's emotional reactions made him fight stupid, made him vulnerable. Current Mark has processed some of that trauma. The vow to kill family threats shows harder mentality, but he's still the same Mark who cares deeply about people. Those emotional buttons still exist for Conquest to push. This would all cause Mark to push past his limits again, and with his further increased powers after regenerating, he'd likely be able to kick Conquest's ass, especially if playing smart. So again, I think Mark would win this one. Scenario 3, Conquest's experience versus Mark's adaptation. This scenario focuses on the core dynamic, millennia of experience versus explosive growth potential. Conquest has fought countless battles, mentored Omni-Man, refined techniques over centuries. When Mark tries something, Conquest has seen variations of it before. When Mark adapts mid-fight, Conquest has experienced countering adaptation, but Mark's growth rate is extraordinary. From Season 1 getting destroyed to Season 3 crushing Viltrumite skulls, that's compressed growth most Viltrumites take decades to achieve. His Viltrumite human hybrid biology might actually enhance his reactive adaptation beyond pure Viltrumites. The fight becomes a race. Can Conquest's experience let him end Mark before Mark's adaptation makes the gap insurmountable? Can Mark survive long enough for his biology to give him decisive advantages? Conquest's impaired regeneration is the timer working against him. Damage accumulates. Having one arm becomes more difficult as the fight continues. Meanwhile, Mark's full regeneration means he recovers from damage Conquest inflicts. Scenario 4, Rage Mode accessibility. The factor that turned their first fight was Mark accessing rage beyond his normal limits, biting Conquest's shoulder, crushing his skull with headbutts, fighting through damage that should have ended him.
Getting mad doesn't make you stronger. That's not how it works.
Can current Mark access that state without the extreme emotional trigger? In their first fight, civilians dying in front of him pushed him there. In a rematch, what triggers that level of intensity? If Mark can tap into rage mode deliberately, this fight shifts heavily in his favor. That version of Mark crushing Conquest's skull before Eve even intervened. But if rage mode requires specific emotional circumstances, Mark might be fighting at a lower ceiling than what Conquest experienced. The research from Season 3 shows Mark's rage biting Conquest's shoulder as desperate attack exemplifies his growth. Whether he can weaponize that rage deliberately determines how his rematch goes. Scenario 5, environmental and circumstantial factors. What if circumstances favor one fighter over the other? In their first fight, they were on Earth with civilians as collateral. They gave Conquest psychological leverage and forced Mark to fight while protecting people. In a rematch in empty space or uninhabited planet, that leverage disappears. Shared vulnerabilities like high-frequency sounds affect both equally, but Mark's training at GDA means he knows how to exploit those weaknesses better than before. Conquest knows them too, but lacks the systematic counter Viltrumite training Mark received. Mark's growth through training, battles, and near-death experiences positions him differently than their first encounter. But Conquest's millennia of combat mastery can't be dismissed. This is closer than it looks. So based on all of this, I think the overall winner for current Invincible versus Conquest is the GOAT himself, Invincible. Season 3 Invincible is the strongest he's ever been, even able to go toe-to-toe with Conquest, and this leaves us with an important question. Could current Invincible stop a Viltrumite invasion? Well, today, I'm going to go over how he got so strong, and every way a potential battle against a Viltrumite invasion would go. The first thing we need to understand is that Mark Grayson's rise into the legend we see by the end of Season 3 is not a story of steady triumph. It is the story of a boy who survives punishment, betrayal, and the kind of battles that would break even the strongest superheroes. His transformation is not a straight line upward, but a jagged path that cuts through loss and immense pressure. What begins as an awkward struggle to live up to an identity as Invincible becomes a war for his soul. A war that costs him his innocence. By the time he reaches the stage where he inspires fear among Viltrumite elites, he has been forged into something far more dangerous than strength alone could ever deliver. Season 1 sets the stage not with glorious victories, but with humbling defeats. Mark begins his journey with all the eagerness of a teenager who has finally discovered his purpose in life. His powers arrived suddenly, but he's excited to test himself against the same villains he saw other heroes fighting against, but it wasn't going to be as easy as he thought it would.
Who's next?
He suffered more losses than wins and is outsmarted by many of his villains, but the belief of him becoming like his father one day is what kept him going. However, the revelation that Omni-Man, his father, is not Earth's protector, but its most immediate threat shattered him. The fight with his father served as a physical and emotional crucible. Nolan could kill him easily, and in most of their exchanges, he does not simply outmatch Mark, he dismantles him, breaking him in ways words cannot mend.
See how you handle this. These people are meaningless.
Yet the devastation is not only in the blood spilled or the bones cracked, it is in the realization that the figure Mark looked up to as the foundation of his vision of strength and morality is in truth the thing he must stand against. It is from this collapse that a new definition of hero is born. Mark learns that victory is not always shining in triumph, but sometimes simply holding ground long enough to stop the world from shattering.
You, Dad. I still have you.
The trial of fire this time takes form in his battle with Angstrom Levy. Everything that Mark encounters with Levy is sharpened into a kind of breaking point. The fight with Levy is brutal, shocking, and blood-soaked, but what haunts Mark more than the violence is what it reveals about himself. For the first time, he is pushed into a place where the idea of being a hero and the acts required to survive no longer align. In the past, he could look back on losses as lessons. Here, he walks away differently, carrying the weight of a moment where his morality bent closer to the breaking point than he ever imagined. He learns from Levy that good intentions are not shields against ruin. Between strength and compassion lies a razor's edge, and Season 2 places Mark directly upon it. He does not fall, but he stumbles, and every stumble costs him another piece of his idealism. He emerges battered but more dangerous than before because now he understands that survival and justice are not clean stories. They are compromises made in blood. By season 3, Mark's transformation begins to show in significant leaps. His speed rises beyond recognition, his endurance grows exponentially, and his physical strength escalates to the point where even juggernauts who once demanded Omni-Man's full attention now crumble in his grip. Measured against the boy he was in season 1, the changes are staggering. It is not the difference between amateur and professional. It is a leap so vast it feels like comparing separate species. The true shift comes in how Mark uses his gifts, where before he lunged blindly, now he predicts. His combat awareness sharpens with every encounter. He learns to judge angles, timing, and terrain, exploiting opportunities with ruthless precision. Gone is the boy hoping to hang on long enough to prove he belongs. In his place stands a young man who strikes like a missile across continents, who turns entire landscapes into weapons, who can challenge not only the strength of seasoned Viltrumites, but their very assumption that experience will always win. By the time season 3 closes, the boy who stumbled into his powers seems unrecognizable. He has been shoved into the nightmare of Viltrumite philosophy and emerged scarred, yet undefeated. His transformation reminds us that power is not made heroic by existing alone. It is molded through encounters that fracture illusions and through decisions too heavy for anyone to bear, let alone a young man carrying the legacy of 2 worlds. Mark Grayson's triumph is not that he is stronger than others, it is that in the face of overwhelming power, betrayal, and fear, he continues to decide what heroism means for him. He is not simply invincible because his body heals or because his fists outmatch enemies who once terrified him. He is invincible because every time he is knocked down, every time his ideals are tested, every time his humanity is dragged toward the abyss of conquest, he chooses to rise back up.
You can't beat her, kid. Say it.
No.
This is the heart of his evolution. Invincible is not the story of perfection, it is the story of endurance. By the end of season 3, Mark does not simply fight villains, he becomes a threat to the empire that built monsters out of strength alone. He has become a figure who proves that strength without empathy is weakness disguised as power. He cannot yet stand as an equal to the oldest warriors of his father's kind, but he has made himself into something far more dangerous. A young man who refuses to yield, who carries every trauma forward like fuel, and who is learning how to turn survival into victory. Mark Grayson's growth cannot be measured only in power or fighting skill. His evolution is equally about what he believes and the choices he makes. At his core, Mark stands between 2 identities. His Viltrumite nature pulls him toward conquest, power, and domination, while his human side insists on protection, empathy, and compassion. This clash defines his journey more than any training sequence or statistic of strength. His morality is not something passed down to him through blood. Instead, it is something he shapes moment by moment, forged by tragedy, loss, and the lesson he takes from watching others suffer. Each fight, each sacrifice, builds the foundation of a justice uniquely his own. Every confrontation becomes more than fists and speed. It is a test of philosophy acted out on the battlefield. When Mark fights to protect the people he loves or strangers in need, his power grows sharper, his resolve unshakable. His blows carry the strength of conviction. But when doubt or grief enters the equation, he falters. Trauma makes him afraid not only of losing, but of crossing a line he can never come back from. Each restrained punch reflects a battle raging inside him, the fear that he might become the same monster he is fighting against. The true fear of a Viltrumite invasion does not only come from the strength of individual soldiers. It rests in the Empire itself, an order built over centuries through relentless culling of the weak. The Viltrumites believe only the strongest deserve to exist, and this ruthless philosophy has shaped them into living weapons. What sets them apart is not simply power, but collective efficiency. Their empire is disciplined, and their methods are chillingly precise. An invasion is not the arrival of a single conqueror, but a coordinated strike on every level. When a Viltrumite force moves, elite warriors like Conquest or Anissa are capable of devastating whole armies by themselves, yet they never arrive alone. Around them stands a legion of lieutenants and strike units, each carrying out missions to destabilize a planet before it can resist. Villains and heroes alike are outmaneuvered by a doctrine that mixes brutality with careful strategy. Their approach combines the strength of one-on-one warfare with tactics that break civilizations. Entire cities are wiped out not just for control, but as sharp warnings to the survivors. Leaders are executed in public to snap morale. Psychological warfare is folded into physical destruction, ensuring that those left standing are too fractured to fight. The Viltrumites exploit weakness wherever they find it, splintering allies against one another until resistance is crushed beneath waves of intimidation and fear. Even among themselves, victory is not easily won. History has shown that Viltrumites find it difficult to overcome their own kind without prolonged battles, which is why Omni-Man was not sent to Earth as a soldier, but as a spy. His mission was slow infiltration, the softening of defenses before the Empire committed its strength. This is the logic of their empire: persuasion first, massacre second. Should the world resist, mercy is abandoned. What separates Mark from the Empire that made him is not power, but perspective. The Viltrumites see compassion as weakness, a flaw to be purged from their bloodline. For Mark, it is the very thing that keeps him from becoming another monster wrapped in strength. Every time he chooses to protect instead of dominate, to save instead of destroy, he rewrites the destiny his father tried to hand him. His struggle is not just against enemies in the sky, but against the legacy carved into his DNA. Ironically, what the Viltrumite dismiss is what makes Mark most dangerous to them. He is unpredictable because he doesn't measure victory through conquest. He fights to preserve, not to rule. That vision of justice, born one scar at a time, is what makes him more than just another soldier of his people.
How little you know of your own people.
They're not my people.
It makes him invincible in a way no empire can understand. If Mark Grayson were ever forced to face a Viltrumite invasion entirely on his own, the path to victory would not lie in head-on clashes or grand battles in open skies. The Empire thrives on direct confrontation, where its soldiers overwhelm their enemies with sheer force and discipline.
You crazy? Take it to your grave.
For Mark to survive, he would have to abandon the idea of fighting their war on their terms. Instead, he would take the role of a predator at the top of the chain, an assassin who hunts with precision, striking quickly and vanishing before counterattacks can close in. Survival would demand ruthlessness, cunning, and an ability to weaponize every ounce of pain and fury he carries. Viltrumites are devastating opponents, but their power makes them arrogant. In the chaos of an invasion, their forces are scattered across worlds, each warrior confident enough to operate as if no peer could ever threaten them. That arrogance becomes their fatal flaw. Mark exploits it relentlessly. He flies faster than sound, crossing continents before distress signals can travel. His strategy is simple: single out the isolated, overwhelm them with a single decisive assault, and withdraw before reinforcements can survive. Each strike is a message carved in blood and ruin, weakening the Empire one soldier at a time. What makes Mark uniquely dangerous is the volatile way his strength grows in proportion to his rage. Trauma, guilt, and desperation do not cripple him, they sharpen him. Against a lone Viltrumite, he channels loss and betrayal into raw power, landing blows that hit harder with every memory of grief. In these moments, hesitation vanishes and instinct takes over. He does not wait for enemies to find him. He hunts them, bursting from the clouds or erupting from the ground with the force of a missile, ending battles before they can truly begin. Even when stealth is impossible and combat turns into a spectacle, Mark adapts. He uses every corner of the environment to his advantage. He crushes enemies through mountain cliffs, drowns them beneath oceans, buries them in avalanches of stone. Nothing is off limits because for him survival matters more than pride. He learned hard truths from clashes with Conquest and Thrag, who showed him that victory only goes to those willing to fight without restraint. When the Empire comes, Mark does not stand like a defender holding a wall. He becomes a shadow in the sky, a force of terror that turns their confidence into fear. Mark chooses Anissa as his opening target, knowing she is both dangerous and symbolic. If he can bring her down, the Empire will feel the shock. He tracks her to a ruined city where she patrols the wreckage as though she owns it. Arrogant and unbothered, she searches for survivors. Mark does not give her that chance. He bursts from underneath a slab of broken concrete, fist blazing upward, the punch landing with enough force to hurl her through 3 buildings in a storm of dust and steel. Anissa rises with a sneer, brushing off debris, unimpressed. But Mark is already on her, hammered with wild, furious strikes. She blocks, counters, her movements sharp and precise. Her blows are calculated, his are furious, but they carry the weight of memory. He fights with Eve's near death carved into his blood, with Nolan's lessons twisted into fuel. When her hook cracks into his jaw, the ground shakes beneath his stumble, yet he does not fall. Rage keeps him upright. Anissa rockets skyward, cutting through the clouds, but Mark chases. They collide midair with an explosion of sound that shatters glass for miles. She fights like the veteran she is, targeting his spine, his throat, his weakness. but Mark adapts, twisting mid-flight, seizing her cape, and dragging her down like a meteor. He spikes her into the earth, pavement splitting, the city groaning under the impact. Blood streaks her face. She rises, taunting him with a bitter laugh. "You are still just a boy." The words ignite him. Mark grabs her arm and squeezes until the bones crack. He does not pause. His forehead slams into hers again and again until her guard falters. Her hand locks around his throat, dragging him upward in a desperate bid to reclaim ground. But Mark has learned from every loss. He flips her momentum, a savage suplex smashing her back into the street, ribs breaking like glass. Crawling, battered, Anissa tries to pull herself free. Mark does not let her though. His fists rain down, each one heavier than the last. His voice rasps through clenched teeth. "Earth isn't yours to take." Her reply is nothing but blood and defiance before his final strike knocks her unconscious. He stops, trembling, torn between mercy and rage, humanity and Viltrumite instinct. As dust swirls, other Viltrumites hesitate. Their commander lies beaten. Mark's victory is not loud. It is undeniable. He has made his first mark on the war, not by arrogance, but by sheer will. And with allies at his side, the fight for Earth shifts from survival to defiance, from resistance to rebellion. The war becomes more than a lone assassin's fury. It becomes a movement. The difference an alliance makes for Mark Grayson in a Viltrumite war can reshape the entire battlefield. No longer does the weight of Earth's survival fall solely on his shoulders. With allies by his side, he ceases to be a lone assassin, stalking enemies in the shadows, and instead becomes a banner, a symbol for a united resistance. The war shifts from survival to strategy, from panic defense to organized defiance. Adam Eve is his closest and most vital partner. Her reality-bending powers allow her to change the landscape of any fight in an instant. She can raise barricades, rebuild crumbling defenses, or even disarm the Viltrumites' advantage by reshaping the ground beneath them. If Mark can keep the enemy distracted, Eve can tilt entire battles in Earth's favor. Cecil Stedman and the Global Defense Agency back the resistance with advanced technology and unconventional weapons. Drones, mechs, spies, and even biological countermeasures are unleashed with ruthless precision. Cecil can be manipulative, but his efficiency and coordination provide a crucial backbone, ensuring Earth's armies are always moving with purpose. The Guardians of the Globe, while outclassed by Viltrumite elites, are indispensable in numbers. Heroes like Black Samson, Monster Girl, Duplicate, and Shrinking Ray swarm the battlefield, buying precious time and keeping civilians safe. Against lesser Viltrumites, they strike as one, using teamwork to achieve what none of them could alone. Alan the Alien and the Coalition add intergalactic muscle. They know how Viltrumite squads think, how they adapt, and how to break their strategies. Their presence not only reinforces Earth's defense, but also gives Mark seasoned allies who understand Viltrumite warfare better than anyone. With these allies, Mark's campaign becomes orchestrated chaos, carried out with calculated purpose. Eve reshapes cities into traps, cutting armies down before they even converge. The GDA tracks every Viltrumite movement with satellites, deploying dampeners to weaken them. The robot supports drones that harass and distract, giving Mark openings for crushing strikes. The Guardians lock down enemy ranks, while Alan and Mark double team the commanders, using raw power to finish what strategy begins. Picture a broken city at dusk. Two Viltrumite lieutenants dive after Mark, but as he cuts past a skyscraper, Eve seals their path with a towering barricade. Mark spins, fueled by fury, tearing into them while the Guardians press in from below. Black Samson lands thunderous strikes, robots' drones bombard their defenses, and Alan arrives, throwing his weight beside Mark's in a clash that shakes the city. When the elite tries to flee, Eve launches entire slabs of Earth skyward, pinning him long enough for Mark to put him down with one brutal strike. With this network around him, Mark stops being a lone warrior fighting to survive. He becomes a commander who can turn battles into victories. Even if he falls, even the Guardians sustain the fight until he rises again. Cecil creates escape routes, Eve reshapes defenses, and the Coalition keeps reinforcements at bay. For the first time, the Viltrumites face fear of their own. Earth is not a prize waiting to be claimed. It is Invincible's world, and here, even gods are forced to bleed. Invincible has come a long way since his first appearance on the show, but by season 3, he's not just surviving Viltrumites, he's starting to destroy them. He's faster, smarter, more ruthless, and finally starting to live up to his name. But how would this version of Invincible cope against Superman? Today, we'll find out. First, their origins, because origins shape everything. For Mark Grayson, his origin is no accident, no twist of fate, no radioactive spider, or experimental explosion. His story begins long before he ever donned a suit or even threw a punch. It begins in a distant world where strength is law and mercy is weakness. That world is Viltrum, a brutal advanced planet ruled by a species that considers itself the pinnacle of evolution, the Viltrumites.
By the time I was born, Viltrum was already the greatest empire in our galaxy. We decided to make it the only empire.
They look human, but they are anything but. With godlike strength, flight, enhanced healing, and virtual immortality, Viltrumites are bred for conquest, but their real power lies in their ideology. Centuries ago, they acted out the most horrifying form of this ideology, and that was slaughtering the weak among their own kind until only the strongest survived. Thousands died. What remained was a civilization that knew only war, domination, and the unshakable belief that it was their divine right to rule the universe. This is where Nolan Grayson comes in. He was a top enforcer of the Viltrum Empire. On Earth, he's known as Omni-Man, the greatest hero the world has ever known. But behind the charming smile and perfect jawline is a conqueror sent to weaken the planet from within. His mission was to gain the trust of the planet and learn its weakness, then prepare for joining the Viltrumite Empire. And he did just that. Decades passed. Nolan embedded himself into human society. He took a job as a travel writer, settled out in the suburbs, and fell in love with a human woman, Debbie.
Mark,
Strike one.
you and I, we made him. This is humanity.
Their union was more than a disguise. It became a complication, because when Mark Grayson, their son, was born, something unexpected happened. It was the beginning of the end of the universe as Nolan knew it. Mark was different. He was half human, half Viltrumite, a hybrid born of two worlds. For years, he showed no signs of power. He was a normal kid in high school, a little awkward, a little sweet, and a little nerdy, obsessed with comics and unsure of who he was. But that normalcy was temporary, because Mark wasn't made to live an ordinary life. His DNA was warforged, and eventually, it woke up. It happened behind a burger joint. One day, as Mark took out the trash at his part-time job, a bag of garbage rocketed into the sky, thrown with a force he didn't know he possessed. That was the moment. His powers had arrived, and everything that came with it. Flight, strength, and insane durability. The Viltrumite side of him had finally activated. He was no longer just Mark. He was becoming something more. He was becoming... Nolan saw it immediately, and his training began soon after. He taught Mark how to control his strength, how to fly, how to fight. But there was always something beneath the surface. An intensity, a pressure, a weight that Mark couldn't quite place. His father's lessons weren't just about becoming a hero, they were about becoming something greater.
I pushed him pretty far. It's what he needs.
Did you maybe push too far?
Are you questioning me?
Nolan believed Mark was destined to be more than just a protector. He was to be a ruler. But Mark wasn't raised on Viltrum. He was raised on Earth. He loved humanity with all its messiness, its failures, and its heart. He believed in justice, in compassion, in second chances. While his powers connected him to Viltrum, his morals were undeniably human. This internal conflict, this war between blood and belief, would define his coming of age. And then the truth came out. When the Viltrumite Empire deemed Earth ripe for conquest, Nolan revealed his true nature. In a moment that shattered everything Mark had ever known, his father slaughtered the Guardians of the Globe, the planet's greatest heroes, and then finally exposed his mission to his son. Earth was weak, he said. The people were fragile. Empathy was a flaw. He begged Mark to join him to help liberate the planet and prepare it for Viltrumite rule. But Mark refused. And so father and son clashed in one of the most brutal battles ever waged. Cities crumbled in their wake, mountains cracked, the planet trembled. But worse than the physical destruction was the emotional one. Every punch was a betrayal. Every blow tore at Mark's identity. He wasn't just fighting to stop his father, he was fighting for the right to be himself. Despite being outmatched, despite taking blow after bone-shattering blow, Mark never gave up. He begged his father to stop, to see Earth not as a target, but as a home. He reminded him of the love they shared, the life they built, and in a single moment, while standing over his broken, bloodied son, Nolan hesitated. A flicker of doubt, of pain, of love cracked the Viltrumite armor. He fled.
What will you have after 500 years?
I still have you.
That day changed everything. Mark didn't win the fight, but he won something more powerful. He won the moral high ground. He chose humanity, he chose compassion, he chose Earth. From that moment forward, Mark embraced his identity as Invincible. He wasn't just a boy with powers. He wasn't just the son of Omni-Man, he was the protector of a planet his father tried to destroy. A bridge between two pieces. A hero forged not by accident, but by choice. But the shadow of Viltrum never vanished. The Empire still loomed. The blood in his veins still carried its legacy. And every battle, every choice, every loss reminded Mark that being invincible didn't mean being unbreakable. It meant refusing to stay down. His origin isn't just about power, it's about the responsibility of power. It's not about gaining abilities, but surviving them, carrying the weight of a past he didn't choose and using it to forge a future he believes in. And this is what he embodies. Mark Grayson is invincible not because he can't be hurt, he's invincible because he never gives up. Now let's look at Superman. Superman, otherwise known as Kal-El's origin story, begins not with power, not with war, but with loss. He was born on Krypton, a world of science, intellect, and grandeur. A planet so advanced, its people forgot humility. Krypton was doomed, not by enemies, not by war, but by arrogance. Warnings of planetary collapse were ignored, and when end came, it came with fire and silence. In the face of that catastrophe, two people chose love over despair. Jor-El and Lara, Krypton's greatest minds. They had only minutes left, but in those final breaths, they made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. They placed their only son, Kal-El, into a tiny ship barely large enough for a child, and launched it toward a distant, yellow-sunned world called Earth. It wasn't just an escape, it was a hope.
You'll be an outcast. A freak. We'll kill him.
Well, he'll be a gaunt to them.
He arrived in America, landing in the fields of Smallville, Kansas, where he was found by Jonathan and Martha Kent. They were humble, hardworking farmers with loving hands and open hearts. They named him Clark and raised him as their own. They taught him that values mattered more than abilities, that being good was more important than being great. But Clark Kent was not ordinary. Under Earth's yellow sun, something impossible began to happen. His alien physiology transformed him. The light itself awakened something divine in his cells. His strength grew. He could fly. He could see through walls. Bullets bounced off him. Fire couldn't touch him. His mind processed faster than the most advanced computers. He could hear a whisper from miles away, breath in space, and move at the speed of light. He became a god in a world of mortals. But what makes Superman the symbol that he is, isn't what he can do. It's what he chooses not to do. He could rule. He could conquer. He could bend the world to his will with a glance. He is Omni-Man on steroids. But he doesn't, because Clark Kent was raised with the greatest gift Krypton never knew: humanity. His parents didn't train him to dominate, they taught him to care, to listen, to help, and to serve. They showed him that strength means nothing without compassion, that power is a burden, not a privilege. While other heroes were shaped by vengeance or violence, Superman was shaped by love. He wasn't made for war, he was made to be better. He wears the S not as a symbol of status, but as a symbol of hope. It's not a weapon, it's a promise, because to him, the real power isn't in lifting buildings or stopping bullets, it's to inspire others, in making people believe they can be better too, that the impossible can be achieved, that justice is not just an idea, it's a responsibility. And yet, for all his power, Superman lives with a quiet loneliness. He is the last son of a dead world, the only living Kryptonian for much of his life. He looks human, he sounds human, he loves humans, but he will always be alien. There are no more like him. No Kryptonian festivals, no shared language of his youth, no memories of his mother's lullaby or his father's voice, just silence where a culture used to be. But rather than retreat into grief, Superman turns that pain into purpose. He chooses to belong. He becomes a journalist, not to chase fame, but to stay close to humanity's heartbeat, to understand its fears, its joys, its stories. He walks among us, not above us. And in doing so, he learns every day how fragile, how miraculous, and how worth protecting life really is. His greatest enemies often mistake his restraint for weakness. They see his mercy as a flaw, but they don't understand the truth. His strength is not an advantage. It's a limit. Because when you're Superman, you can't afford to lose control. You can't fight with rage. You don't get to be careless. Every battle is a calculation. Every step is measured. Every punch is pulled. He operates under a pressure no one else can comprehend. A single mistake could flatten a city. A second of selfishness could cost millions of lives. And still, he shows up. Every day, he chooses to be the best of us. Not because he has to, not because he was programmed to, but because he believes in us. That's what makes Superman truly invincible. Not the lasers, not the strength, not the flight. but the hope, the unshakable, impossible belief that this world, flawed as it is, can rise, that people can change, that goodness matters. He's not a savior from above. He's a man trying to live up to legacies, the wisdom of Krypton and the heart of Kansas. Kal-El may be the last son of Krypton, but Superman? Superman is Earth's son now, and he's chosen to carry out burdens, to reflect our potential, and to remind us that hope, no matter how buried, always rises.
We, as a population on this planet, have been looking for a savior. 90% of people believe in a higher power.
And that's where Invincible's belief system comes together with this. The unshakable belief in humanity. But what happens when they are pitted against each other? Now, growth matters, especially in Invincible's case, and he has grown. Season 1 Mark was a rookie, a kid thrown into battles he wasn't ready for. His dad nearly beat him to death and made him watch as thousands died. He got stomped by Battle Beast and traumatized at every turn. He had raw power, but no control. Bravery? Sure, but that wasn't enough. By Season 2, we saw Mark evolve. He's smarter, he's faster, he starts thinking like a fighter, not just swinging wildly. He pushes through fear and through failure, and the beatings keep coming, but he starts giving them back. It was also the first time he let his rage take control, killing Angstrom Levy in the process. Now, Season 3 Invincible, this Mark is different. He's been through galactic wars, he's fought Viltrumite elites, held his own against Lucan, and he's made choices his father would hesitate to make. He's not just fighting anymore, he's commanding. He's learning control, precision, and restraint. His regeneration has improved. His flight, second nature. Strength, he's finally getting close to Omni-Man, and he's starting to understand his place in the Viltrumite hierarchy. He's not a pawn, he's a threat. But there's a problem. His opponents isn't just another powerful alien, it's Superman, the blueprint, the benchmark, the beginning and the end of the superhero scale. You don't just match Superman with strength. You don't just outpunch him. You outlast a legacy that spans galaxies. Because let's be honest, even at his peak, Season 3 Invincible is playing in the minor leagues. Superman's been in the major leagues since birth. Because when it comes to raw power, it's not even close. Mark Grayson can punch through concrete bunkers. He can take hits from Viltrumites strong enough to crack moons. And he is fast. He can fly through the atmosphere across continents in seconds. But Superman? He bench presses planets literally for 5 days straight. He had an Earth mass stimulator that he held near the sun for that long. He's flown fast enough to outrun death itself because he can go to Flash tier speeds. His heat vision? That can cut through celestial armor. His ice breath is strong enough to extinguish stars.
Not impressed.
You know how Invincible struggles against the Mauler twins? Superman can breathe and that entire mountain they're hiding in collapses. There can be no comparison between their strengths. Mark gets tired after fighting Thrag for a few minutes. Superman has gone toe-to-toe with Darkseid, Doomsday, and Shazam all at once and kept going. This isn't a difference in level, it's a difference in scale. Now, Mark's durability has grown. He survives orbital re-entry. He tanks punches that would obliterate tanks. When Conquest crushed his skull, he lived. He can regenerate slowly, but steadily. He's hard to kill. But Superman can tank hits from gods. He has survived a supernova. He has taken a blast from Darkseid's Omega beams and smiled. He has withstood black hole level gravity and has shrugged off nukes like they were mosquito bites. Mark heals from damage. Superman barely gets damaged. Their combat style is where it gets interesting. Mark fights like a Viltrumite. Head first, brutal and emotional. He has improved. He maneuvers, redirects, and uses the environment. But he's still very reactive. You hit him hard, he hits back harder. He's getting smarter, but he's not a tactician yet.
See, more than enough. Not enough.
Superman? He's trained with Batman, Wonder Woman, and the Justice League. He's a calculated striker. He knows how to end fights quickly, not just win them. And if things get out of control, he holds back less than people realize. You might think Mark's raw savage nature gives him an edge, but Superman doesn't just fight. He does precision strikes with light speed and planet-breaking power behind every hit. Even in what they share, there is no competition. Mark has one of the hardest wills in modern superhero fiction. He fights when he knows he'll lose. He fights when he wants to give up. When Conquest nearly killed him, he got back up. When Omni-Man tore the planet apart, he chose mercy. That will is Viltrumite steel plus human compassion. But Superman has watched worlds die and kept hope alive. He's been mind-controlled, tortured, turned into a god, made mortal, and never once stopped being Superman. His restraint is not weakness, it's control. He holds back every second to keep the planet safe. If his full will is unleashed, that's when entire timelines collapse. Mark has willpower. Superman is willpower. So let's imagine it. Let's say it's Earth. No prep, just the two of them. Mark doesn't wait and he flies in. The ground shatters behind him. He's ready. Superman stands calmly. No fear and no rage, just focus. Mark strikes first and he goes at it with a full speed punch. Superman doesn't move. Then a blur. One punch from Superman. Mark flies into the sky, into orbit, through the moon. But this is Invincible. He comes back bleeding and angry. He fights with every ounce of will he has. But Superman, he adapts. He blocks faster, hits harder. Mark grabs his cape and Superman will turn and knock the breath from his lungs. And with one final hit, he ends it. Not fatally, just definitively. Because Superman doesn't kill unless he must. And Mark isn't an enemy. He's a soldier learning his place. But what if Mark kept evolving? Let's say Mark gets stronger and faster. Let's say he even surpasses Omni-Man. Maybe one day he reaches Thrag level. He gets smarter, starts fighting tactically, and gains decades of combat experience. Could he eventually rival Superman? Maybe. Even through it all, it ends with a maybe. If he trains for centuries, gets cosmic artifacts, and evolves past Viltrumite biology, he could one day end a fight in a stalemate. Because even with everything that Invincible can do, Superman's been doing that since the 1930s. In the end, Season 3 Invincible versus Superman? No. Invincible doesn't win. Not yet, at least. If you like this breakdown, check out the full analysis of would Invincible win every fight he has lost so far.